June 1, 1995, the doors of Mervyn's flagship in San Diego swung open to a crowd of 12,000 eager shoppers, each clutching a glossy flyer promising, "Everything must go at 20% off." It was a moment that captured the height of a retail empire that, just a decade earlier, had been a modest chain of family-run discount stores. By the turn of the millennium, Mervyn's boasted 400 locations across the western United States, a brand built on low-priced family fashion, a clean-cut, no-frills shopping experience, and a promise that the everyday American could afford a little style without breaking the bank. Yet beneath the bright signage and the neatly stacked aisles, a series of financial decisions, most notably the aggressive involvement of private equity firms, were carving the company up from the inside, setting the stage for a collapse that would echo through the retail world in 2008. Mervyn's story began in 1949, when the eponymous founder, Mervyn H. Merv Stern, opened a single clothing store in San Lorenzo, California. Stern's mantra was simple: offer quality apparel at discount prices and keep the shopping environment pleasant and family-friendly. The concept resonated, and by the early 1970s, the chain had expanded to 30 stores, earning a reputation for consistency and value. In 1977, the company went public, raising capital that fueled a rapid expansion across the West Coast, into the Rocky Mountains, and eventually into Texas and the Southwest. By the mid-1990s, Mervyn's had positioned itself as the go-to destination for middle-class families seeking the latest trends without the boutique price tag. The first warning signs emerged in the late 1990s, when the retail landscape began to shift dramatically. Big box competitors such as Walmart and Target were expanding aggressively, leveraging economies of scale to undercut traditional department stores. Simultaneously, the rise of e-commerce hinted at a looming digital revolution that would upend brick-and-mortar sales. Mervyn's response was cautious, rooted in its legacy model of modest store footprints and a reliance on regional purchasing power. The chain invested heavily in remodeling existing locations, adding new product lines, and launching an ambitious Mervyn's for Men campaign aimed at capturing a more upscale demographic. However, these initiatives required substantial capital, and the company's profit margins began to thin. In 2004, a pivotal moment arrived when Mervyn's was acquired by a private equity consortium led by Cerberus Capital Management and the investment firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, KKR. The deal, valued at $1.5 billion, promised to inject fresh liquidity and strategic expertise, but it also introduced a new set of pressures. Private equity firms typically target rapid cost reductions, asset sales, and aggressive debt restructuring to maximize returns for investors. For Mervyn's, this translated into a wave of store closures, aggressive rent renegotiations, and a steep increase in leveraged debt. Within months, over 30 underperforming stores were shuttered, and the company's balance sheet swelled with high-interest loans used to finance the buyout. The private equity model placed Mervyn's in a precarious position. On one hand, the influx of capital allowed the chain to modernize its inventory systems and launch a modest online storefront. On the other, the mounting debt service obligations eroded cash flow, leaving little room for the kind of price competition required to survive against Walmart's everyday low prices. By early 2006, analysts noted that Mervyn's same-store sales were declining at a rate of 3% annually, while its debt-to-equity ratio had climbed to an alarming 2.8. The warning bells grew louder when the company announced a $200 million refinancing plan that included a secondary lien on its most valuable assets, effectively putting its real estate holdings at risk. The final crack came in the summer of 2008. As the subprime mortgage crisis unfolded, consumer confidence plummeted and discretionary spending shrank dramatically. Mervyn's, already operating on razor-thin margins, faced a sudden drop in foot traffic and a spike in inventory markdowns. On July 10, 2008, the board announced a $150 million loss for the quarter, a loss that far exceeded internal forecasts. The next day, Cerberus and KKR convened a crisis meeting, during which the private equity owners decided to pull the plug on further capital infusions, opting instead to let the company liquidate its assets to recoup what they could. On December 29, 2008, Mervyn's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, listing $2.5 billion in liabilities against $1.5 billion in assets. The filing marked the end of a 59-year retail saga, and within weeks, the chain announced that all remaining 332 stores would close by the end of March 2009. The closures rippled across dozens of communities, leaving thousands of employees without jobs and empty storefronts in suburban malls that had once thrived on the steady flow of families. For many shoppers, the loss was more than just a place to buy clothes. It was the disappearance of a familiar gathering spot, a symbol of post-war prosperity that had defined their everyday lives. In the aftermath, the vacant Mervyn's locations became a case study in commercial real estate oversupply. Some were absorbed by competing retailers, while others stood empty for years, becoming visual reminders of the 2008 financial crisis. The private equity firms involved faced intense scrutiny, accused of strip-paying the company, extracting cash dividends and asset sales that left Mervyn's unable to weather the economic storm. Lawsuits were filed by former employees and suppliers who claimed they were left with unpaid wages and undelivered merchandise. Subscribe to The Collapse for more stories like this.